Call Marty and Clay at 842-KERN or toll free at 1-800-640-KERN. Now, more of Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.
We are back on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180 with our guest, State Senator Gene Fuller. Little Mannheim steamroller there, a little silent night. So, Clay, you had a question for Gene?
Well, I actually had several questions, but one of them, I was looking at the Air Resources Board that's killing this state. They've overestimated the number of trucks, it said in the paper today. The Central Valley is being charged millions of dollars. How can we eliminate either the board or get rid of those taxes, I guess it is, because it's not just the Central Valley that's causing the bad air.
Well, absolutely. This again is, sort of science based on false assumption. You can't just penalize the people at the end of the pipe. You've got to look at where the air starts, which would be clear up in San Francisco, gets funneled down in this area, and work with the whole area. Unfortunately, eliminated commissions now, given that we have a Democratic majority and a Democratic governor, is probably not likely. We did try last year with Schwarzenegger's help to eliminate a lot of the commissions and things. We did get some of them pared down, but they are just like weeds. They just grow right back up. And the liberals water the weeds, so to speak. And at the end of the day, if we just got rid of we could get rid of about $1 billion worth of stuff if we just got rid of all the commissions and say, okay, local government has to figure it out. And that would be better. Everybody at local government knows what they need.
Locally, yeah. I think you're right.
Yep.
The other question I had is, we're so upside down on our budget. What are some of the reasons for that?
Well, let me just talk about, first of all, that we are currently spending $1.20 for every dollar we collect. So that's problem number one. Okay, and what happened is going into the recession, which was just before I went up there, we did not have enough reserves. So we need a spending cap because we had a balanced budget act, but nobody was doing it. And we need a rainy day fund. And you remember the Governor Schwarzenegger proposed the rainy day fund, right. And the Republican team passed that budget with that in it, but then it didn't work out. So we have to have those two features because we didn't have enough reserve going in. Then we were unable to get a legislative majority to cut enough cuts or reinvent or get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And so we continued to spend more than we were taking in. The recession deepened. We went from $100 billion. We had $103 billion when I went down to $100 billion. And now we have $80 billion in revenues, and we're still spending at about the $100 billion. And so now we have this huge cash liquidity problem because now we've moved to the last stage of the problem, and all of you guys know very well that if you're spending more continually of ongoing money than you're getting, then you are going to pretty soon not be able to pay your bills. And sort of that's where we are right now. There's revenues that we could be working on, and there's expenditure cuts that we could be doing. But the governor is the person that starts that process, that makes the budget and hands it off to the legislature.
One of the budget items that they've talked about is selling office buildings around the state. And when I looked at that, it appears that, yes, they'll bring in a couple of $1 billion now, but over the long term, they're going to spend several times that in rent.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about, really, okay, how much office space should everybody get? Well, if you and I just pay for less, they're going to have less. So that's number one. But then you have to squeeze the bureaucracy so that they actually use less. And if they just make deals with leasebacks and whatever, they're not really getting at what we ask them to do, are they?
No.
Okay. And so the issue to me is not to stop, the sale of buildings, or not to stop. The issue is just to make the bureaucracy do it in a way that works, because you can look all over any city, but particularly Sacramento, and you can see buildings that are overbuilt and underoccupied.
Is there a chance that California may go bankrupt?
Well, there is no bankruptcy process for states. Eventually, I think the feds probably have to come up with one. A bankruptcy proceeding basically means that when people can't pay their bills anymore, there's a formula for who gets it, and investors know that ahead of time, so people take that into concern. What happens with states is there's no procedure like that, so what happens is they just stop seeing their bills. You saw us stop paying our bills in the last couple of years.
Sure.
You saw us like not paying the employees, not paying the vendors, and then they got different people to pay for them at different times, big business carried some of those debt, and they got away with it for longer. But at the end of the day, it's gonna stop. Everybody's gonna say, "Look, I'm not funding this anymore. I'm not doing this." And so at that point, services will stop, and we'll have to start over.
Because you're looking at some people that are looking at 30, 60, 90 days out. Some people even longer than that before the state actually pays the bill.
Absolutely, you are. And the problem is if they're small businesses, which we've encouraged for a long time to try to be providers and vendors, they rightfully can't carry that long. And so it's forcing businesses out of the providership that we want, because small business is great to be relying on, that's just not right.
Gene, I hate to keep changing the subject, and it's really not a good idea when you're in radio to keep changing the subject, but there's so many things I want to talk to you about.
This is great, Clay.
One of them is we had a presentation at the Chamber at the Marriott Hotel last Tuesday, and one of the subject was high-speed rail. And it was a great presentation, and I'm wondering, what's the state's position on high-speed rail?
Well, I think the state's position is changing a little bit. When it was first passed, the state was in a decline, but they hadn't really felt the full nature of it, and people thought it was going to be a little bit shorter. Now we're at the stage where if we seriously don't do something about the budget deficit in a structural reform way, we may not have a rating to be able to even borrow for whatever funds that the high-speed rail needs. But the big piece to this, and the piece to watch, is that this was a matching fund piece with private industry. And when that was designed that way, the assumption was no one in private industry would invest in a bad deal. And so as long as that private industry piece was in there, it was gonna no matter what any bureaucracy said it was going to do, that was going to be what they would be investing in, something that they believe would make money. I'm afraid that they will pull that piece out or soften that piece or not make it a matching, and when they do that, then we're in big trouble.
The current railroad hasn't made any money. It's always in the red. I mean, nationwide, we're in the red on the railroads. It sounds wonderful because we're going to create all these jobs in building the railroad, which is wonderful. But once it's built, what have we got?
Well, I've always said that my priority is the water infrastructure, because I believe the water infrastructure actually not only delivers the jobs to build it, but it produces new wealth when you put it back on farms and farms come up with food. So that's just my much higher priority at this time.
Gene, we're going to shift gears again. We've got to have you back for a longer period of time.
Sure. It's always great to visit with you guys. It goes by so fast.
Yes, it does. Now, we're looking at this. We're looking at the nightmare scenario for us as Republicans, okay? We have Jerry Brown in office, and the proposition passed where all we need is a simple majority to literally pass the budget. So what are we looking for or towards in the next 2 or 4 years? I mean, it's almost a little frightening.
Well, it is, because now I believe that the liberal side of the party believe they have a mandate to increase mitigating for greenhouse gases. You just saw the cap and trade thing come right out, man. That's a killer for us, especially in our area. I think manufacturing and farming and all the things that are important to our area, construction, are going to be very hard hit until the point at which the public gets the connection between liberal candidates and liberal policies. And when that happens and everybody wakes up that people want more efficient services. Mm-hmm. They want more efficient services. And they're tired of having to pay more and not getting anything more. And in fact, usually getting less. So, there has to be a vote change. There just has to be, because now the budget is basically, if they want to make a credit card budget, they can do that. And the rest of us are obligated to pay it. But it takes a 2/3 vote to come up with the funds to pay it, and the Republicans aren't going to do that.
So what do you see happening in the next 2 years? Do you think there's going to be the sea change that's happening in the rest of the country, is it going to finally hit California, hopefully?
Well, I absolutely believe that if, I don't see how we couldn't change direction, that, unless we change directions, that it absolutely has to hit here. Absolutely has to, because we will we will not have a way to pay all of our bills. There's no way to generate the money for those social services that everybody wants.
Yeah, it's crazy. Jean, thank you for being here. It's been a short segment, unfortunately, and it's never long enough when we get to talk to you.
Well, it's Merry Christmas to you guys. You know I love everything that you do, and thanks for being such service-minded people to our community. Everywhere I go, I see you guys, and it's great.
Thank you, Jean. I appreciate you.
We're easy to see.
Yes, we are. My wish for all of you is a Merry Christmas, and my hope for you is that we all keep in mind what we're really, really, truly celebrating. And Merry Christmas, Jean. Merry Christmas, Clay.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, Goose. That's it for this year. We'll see you in 2 weeks on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.